What is real? How do you define real?
You can't jump into cash. Cash is trash. What do? You get out.
Jordan Bush is the co-author of Thank God for Bitcoin, The Creation, Corruption, and Redemption of Money. Jordan is a missionary and church planter currently serving in Montevideo, Uruguay. He grew up in a Christian family, but it wasn't until his later years of high school that he came to believe the gospel and understand the implications of Christ's lordship over all things. That primary conviction deepened in university as he studied philosophy alongside the Judeo-Christian scriptures. Studying economic philosophy eventually led him down the Bitcoin rabbit hole. He is a husband, a father of four, and enjoys playing an ever-decreasing quality of basketball. Welcome to the Bitcoin Matrix podcast, Jordan. How are you?
I'm doing well, Seth. Thank you.
Well, it's great to have you here. You know, I picked up the book right away when it came out. Jimmy and Robert have been on the show. I love the title. Kind of like almost like, thank God it's Friday. Thank God for Bitcoin, the creation, corruption, and redemption of money. I was just really excited about it. And when I got into it, I was digging it. And I just kind of turned to the back pages. And, you know, you kind of intrigued me right off the top of the bat. I kind of wanted to bring you in to talk about the book first. So I'm really excited to have you here. You know, and one of the things I just kind of want to get to know you a little bit better. So you grew up in a Christian family, but it wasn't later to you really kind of I guess maybe dived in or took Christianity more seriously. And so what was Christianity like in your home? And what was that evolution like?
Sure. Yep. So my parents, my dad was a first generation Christian. Like he grew up in a family where his dad was an alcoholic. And so he just experienced that life. His dad would take him to the bar, you know, pretty much every night. And so he grew up there and had this small church, this very small, you know, church in the middle in the woods, basically just offered to come pick him up and take him to church. And so, I mean, he was one of a bunch of kids and he has a bunch of brothers and sisters. And so just this kind of like, all right, let's just get him out of our hair. You know, he ended up going to this little church, and that's where, you know, he heard about Jesus. And so his life, once he got to middle high school, was just vastly different than his experience. And so he's trying to figure out, I mean, not having any kind of Christian background, he's trying to find out, like, what does this look like to follow, you know, Jesus, just in a, you know, as a dad, not having had that. And, you know, how do you think through all these things? So I grew up in a situation where, I mean, I didn't have any of those kind of things that my dad experienced. And at the same time, I mean, it was, so my parents both work for this an NGO, a nonprofit organization that basically tries to help kids and basically, you know, share with kids about Jesus. And they help, you know, they're in a bunch of countries all over the world. And so, so I grew up around the church, around, you know, the Bible and all these things. And when I was a little kid, I really was into it, and really like they did all these competitions to try to help kids learn, you know, Bible verses. And so I would like win all these trophies because I, you know, was really super competitive. And so I just remember, you know, I got to a point where, you know, grew up there, and then I started going to school, and there was nobody who was a Christian. And so I just realized I don't have any friends, and I just got to a point where I just really wanted friends. And so I just kind of started like distancing myself from, you know, the things of, you know, the church. And so it got to the point when I was about like 16, I remember my dad was trying to get me just to like refocus in that direction. And he just was trying to get me to read the Bible for like 5 minutes a day, and, you know, pray for a few minutes a day. And I just remember, I have a Bible here, but I had a Bible, and I just remember I held the Bible. I was like, this book is stupid. Why am I going to waste my life with this stupid book that's worthless? And I just threw the Bible. And so, you know, my dad, I mean, didn't say anything, like, to his credit. Like they weren't just trying to like force this down my throat. They just wanted me to appreciate what they had found that become so important to them. And so, so basically it was a few years later that I heard the message of Jesus, you know, that I'd heard my entire life. Like I'd heard the same message that, you know, Jesus had come to, you know, die for the sins of the world, and that he did it because he loved, you know, people. And so I could have told you that message. I could have shared with you, this is what it means to be a Christian. And I just didn't want to submit myself to that. I didn't want someone to tell me what to do. I wanted to go play basketball and, you know, get girls and do all those things. And And so, yeah, so I knew these things were true on some level, but just didn't want to submit to them. And so I got to a point where I just heard this message, and it was like lights turned on, and all of a sudden this message that I couldn't care less about before, literally in the span of moments, I just got to a point where I was like, man, this is the only thing I want to do. And so just for the rest of that was at like this youth camp thing. And so in the days and weeks that followed, I mean, I just would get by myself alone and just read the Bible. Something that like I just had never had any desire to do, up to that point. And then all of a sudden, just in a moment, those desires were there. And so again, not like a perfect seamless transition, it wasn't like this saint afterwards or anything, but I just had these new desires that I didn't have before. And so, yeah, that was that's in a nutshell, that's kind of where things started. And then so over time, those desires took me different places. So,
yeah, you said something that really interested me, but you were I think your father was a first generation Christian.
Yeah.
And so that makes you like a second generation, but I don't usually think of Christianity or in America like that.
Yeah.
And do you think some of that push and pull was because you were second generation and maybe you were questioning your father's choices and whether he was right or not?
Yeah, no, I think it was more just like, again, I mean, you have other religions, you have like Judaism, where it's this very historical, very family. I mean, just it's incredible. Like there's somebody, I can't remember his name, one time said, "What is the greatest evidence of the truthfulness of the Bible?" And it's the existence of the Jewish people. Like you see so many other cultures who existed thousands of years ago that are no longer here. And so the fact that like people of the Jewish faith took so seriously these things that God had told them about, training up their children and teaching these things to their children. I think what I was wrestling with was like, what does it mean that my parents believe these things and there's this whole world around me that doesn't? And that's another thing, like with the Jewish faith, it's so much cultural, and with Christianity, that part is there, but just in the specific day-to-day interactions that I was having in my school and stuff, there weren't people to like reaffirm those, religious beliefs. And so I think that was the thing that I just was wrestling with was, what my school culture is telling me one thing, and then my family culture is telling me another, and they're two warring, belief systems. And and so for a long time, it was just hard for me to reconcile those two things.
Yeah. In terms of those two warring belief systems, do you think that's just a factor of life in America, and is that just like a normal thing, and is that like an impediment or an obstacle to certain people's development?
Yeah, I think, I mean, I've said this before, I think the hardest people to talk to about spiritual things and specifically about the Bible are not people who've never had any contact with those concepts and ideas. It's people who have had contact, and either you were either really hardened by them, or they suffered abuse at the hands of, religious faiths or, the church or whatever. I mean, people who've had bad experiences, those are the hardest people to talk to, because like they can't, and totally understandably, like the actual, beliefs themselves about, that the scriptures lay forward, they see those things, and those things are colored by the pain or whatever that they've experienced. And so I think that's part of it. I think another thing, like one of the things that they talk about just in describing the state of, Christianity in the West, you have like, they call them like post-Christian cultures. And so you have these cultures that whether people like it or not, or individual people want to acknowledge it or not, like they were built on these, they were founded on these Christian, belief systems about, what the world is like, about law. I mean, the entire Western world is built on, the idea of the Judeo-Christian, moral system. And so there's like these ghosts of there's like the ghost of these religious faiths, or these religious beliefs that we still have. But just, I think, and this is part of the thing that fiat, I think fiat plays a big role in this, is for the last 50 years, you've had this disconnect between just more and more because fiat makes people have to work more hours, and it's really separated, had this really horrible effect on parents and children. And so I think that because of that, there's been this disconnect. And so over time, parents haven't been training up their children, and their children have this completely different daily experience than them, being at school the majority of the day. And, parents are off working, and they're having to work super hard, being super tired. And I just think there's lots of forces that are warring and making it difficult for children to see their parents' experience as you know, someone to imitate. I mean, I think that's a lot. There's a lot more to that, but I think that's got something to do with it.
Yeah, sure. When you and I don't, I'm going to choose my words carefully, like evolved
Sure.
or
Sure.
found Christianity as you got older, did that rekindle or add a new aspect to your relationship with your father and maybe your mother too?
Yeah, honestly, I mean, this is crazy, but like, so basically when I was 16, that kind of transformation kind of started. And then when I went to college, the only thing that my parents cared about was that I would go to like a Bible college for like a year. So there's basically you just take 1 year where the nonprofit organization that they work for has like one of the feature things that they do are these like Bible institutes where you go for a year and you focus on that. And then after that, you can go off and study whatever you want to. And so for my whole life, like up until I graduated high school, I was like, please, I don't want to go do that. I wanted to go to like the University of North Carolina and study journalism, or the University of Syracuse and study sports journalism. That's, really what I wanted to do with my life. And I knew my parents were going to make me do that. And so, but I knew my parents were going to make me do that. I got to the end of high school, and right as I graduated high school, I had kind of like this experience again, where just the spiritual, I just saw again, the importance of the spiritual aspect of my life. And just the fact that my life's choices were going to have a huge impact on the way that my life went. And so, I think so. And long story short, I ended up going to this Bible Institute. And so once I got there, I just really the more that I spent time in the scriptures, the more that I just got to the point where I was like, man, this is really what I want to do with my life. Like this is just what I'm passionate about. And this is what I want to do. What was your question again? Like, I feel like I'm not.
Well, you kind of answered it. I asked about, did it bring you closer to your father, and that infers that you weren't close. So meaning maybe you were close. Did it bring you closer, or did it add an aspect you didn't have?
Yeah, forgive me. So there's two parts of that. Number one has to do with Bitcoin. I'll mention that in a second. But to answer your question, yes, it did. It did bring me closer to my parents a lot, because I feel like what happened after that time period, and specifically when I went to this Bible Institute, was I feel like I experienced what my parents had experienced and like what had gotten them so passionate about spending their life, helping people and sharing this message that had impacted them. And so when I got to this institute, every day you were studying the Bible for like 5 hours a day, which, to a lot of people, you're like, what on earth? Like, why would anyone want to do that? And again, the incredible thing is I will be the first to admit it's incredible. It's like, that's what I really enjoyed. I was waking up early to even, read the Bible and pray more and stuff. And so I just remember throughout that year, I called my parents numerous times. And I'm not like, I am more of an emotional like person now, but like, I just would call my parents and just be in tears, asking them to forgive me for the horrible way that I treated them when I was in high school. Because I really did. I just treated them like crap. Just totally disrespectful, didn't care at all, just was so sick of, everything, and just treated them, but didn't respect at all just the love that they had for me, just was totally focused on myself and my own life. And so there was numerous times where I just called them and just said, I was so wrong, So it really did bring us closer together.
I really see like a lot of circle of life kind of, feeling here. And so at some point, you find Christianity, and then you decide that it's not just for you, but that you want it to be your life's work. I think similar like your dad. And so now you're a missionary and a church planter. And what is a church planter? I kind of know a little bit about a missionary. And when we talked a little bit before the show, I kind of got the idea of what a planter is, but if you could kind of elaborate on what a church planter is.
Yeah, so it's kind of interesting. And it's one of my favorite metaphors, like to compare Bitcoin to, honestly. So basically the idea of a church planter is, planter is a plant. So basically you have this idea of taking a plant from one place, this thing that's this living being, this living, this living growing thing, and moving it from a place where there's lots of those to a place where maybe there's not very many. And so one of the things that, I grew up around the church, but like my parents, because my parents worked for this organization that was affiliated with churches, but wasn't really a church itself. when I started studying the scriptures and I started seeing like involvement with a a local church itself is something that the scriptures put a lot of emphasis on that hadn't necessarily been my experience growing up. That was just something that I started getting involved with. And so when we I moved to Pensacola in Florida, we started getting involved with a small church that was newer. It only existed for 2 or 3 years. And so we started, ministering and helping along that. And they were ministering in inner city contexts and helping people who, didn't have very good home lives. And so the more that I lived and experienced and helped out in that atmosphere, the more I saw, man, like a local church is really suited to solve and to help with a lot of these things. It's not just this service where you go once a week. We had people who lived in this context who were coming in and out and trying to help people just with everyday needs. And so the more that I worked in that context, the more I saw, man, this is really what I want to do. It's not about a building. It's not about, the services and all this kind of stuff. It's just we're living here and we're just on a day-to-day basis, just kind of living our lives alongside of people and just trying to, put ourselves in and minister to people in any way that we can. And so long story short, we found another nonprofit organization, a mission organization that basically does that around the world. They go to places in the world where there's not very many churches or church communities that are doing that kind of thing. And they take a group of people and they move them there. And then, so it's safer for the workers themselves. You have community, because that's one of the hardest things about moving overseas is just, you don't know anybody. And so we moved overseas with a group of, 5 or 6 other people and just started meeting people and started, when we had the opportunity, sharing, about Jesus. And so over time, we had people who started to believe that and just kind of started to seeing how this message people in Uruguay, there's a lot of people who have some kind of background with the church. Sometimes it's the Catholic Church, and that's not a good thing. Other times people do have kind of a better, experience. But basically we just were kind of just studying the Bible alongside people. And so that's kind of what we've been done. That's what we've been doing. We moved this, church community here and just kind of, it started to, create itself. And so now we have, our church is basically constituted of about, 50 to 60 people, families, older people, younger people. It's kind of a good representation of, what the city looks like. I mentioned this in other podcasts. We have some Venezuelan immigrants who are about 30-40% of the church at this point. But yeah, so just seeing this intermingling of people from different cultures and backgrounds and, economic situations, it's been really cool to see everybody kind of coming together and helping to serve each other.
Yeah. I grew up secular Jewish, but I've been fortunate enough to, I was bar mitzvahed. Kind of push and pull with that. My parents were secular as well, but and then I was lucky enough to go to Israel a few times on a filmmaking trip, once on a birthright trip where I met my wife, once on an educational trip, and I actually studied the Talmud in the evenings. I enjoyed the debates. And, it's interesting. I also got a chance to backpack the South Pacific by myself for a few months.
Cool.
And I was in Fiji, and I took a plane to a small island that gets maybe 1,000 visitors a year. Yeah. And I stayed at this remote, I don't even think you could really call it a hostel. There were just huts on the grounds. Okay. And I got to meet the homeowner and we got into a really interesting conversation where, he was very fortunate when he graduated high school in Fiji to get an opportunity to go to serve in the Fijian army, which was because of the colonial relationship with the UK. He was able to get schooling in the UK, and he went to the UK for a year, and he was actually, excelling. But his home, somewhere in his homeland, they were like, we need you and we need your skills to build a church. Okay. And if you come home and forego your life in England, you'll build the church here. And at the end of that, we'll reward you, not reward you in a bad way. Just, we'll, and he got a piece of land, a beautiful piece of land. And that's his home. And he raised his family there. And, one day, somebody, who ran a Lonely Planet wandered onto his property and stayed there, and he built a business out of that. And, we just had a very interesting conversation about life, and he was looking back on his life and really dissecting that opportunity he had. And there was a moment where he relished the unseen, but you could tell that he really had there was a lot of contentment with what he had done for the island and his people and the community. And I was
It's really
always
cool.
fascinated by that. Yeah. And so I want to then, now turn to, so you've been in Uruguay for, I
Yeah.
think, 6 years now.
Yeah. Yep.
I don't know if this is your first mission, overseas.
Yeah.
And so, whether it is or isn't, just like, what is it like? You got into a little bit, but like, how's it been? Um, and kind of like, what is maybe like a day in the life after you've
Sure.
kind of built or planted the
Yeah.
church?
So basically, I mean, our experience was pretty crazy. I mean, honestly, like in some ways, I mean, it's your Montevideo is a big city. I mean, relative to Latin America. So Uruguay has about 3.5 million people, and about 1.8 of them live in Montevideo. And so, I mean, we live downtown in the
Oh,
city,
okay.
and so yeah. So it's like when people think like missionary, they think like huts, and stuff.
Right. Well, when
And
you said
so
church planter, I didn't know if it was going to be
yeah,
rural, like your
yeah.
father.
Yeah, no, and so there's lots of people who do that. There's lots of different groups who are working. But basically, the reason why we actually moved to one of the like the more, I mean, one of the wealthier parts of the city. And so what the reason why we chose this place, and there's a bunch of other nonprofit organizations that chose this place around the same time as we did as well, is because I mean this there's a city here. It's called Positos, which means little well. And so Positos has like the smallest number of churches out of, per capita, like than almost any other place in the Western Hemisphere. There's one place in, Paraguay that has something, it's comparable. But, and so the reason for that is because it's basically, I mean, there's just, yeah, I mean, just wealthier. I mean, Jesus said that, it's hard for the rich to inherit the kingdom. And basically, it's hard for you to see your spiritual need when you can, by your own, you can meet all your own physical needs. And so, yeah, so Positos is this, pretty comfortable, wealthy place. And so, yeah, so basically, and so alongside that, so they're wealthier, so they have a more comfortable life. But at the same time, the rate of suicide and depression here is one of the highest in the entire Western Hemisphere. And so yeah, so that was a lot of what kind of drew us here. I mean, like I dealt with like anger and depression for a lot of my life growing up, and especially when I for my second year of college, I really just like wrestled with those things. And so having seen how both my faith itself and then just other people who believed that same message, how like they kind of rallied around me. I had two people who really during those really hard times rallied around me and were there to just be like, hey, we just help you, can we just be with you, and that really helped me a lot. And so knowing that there were people in Uruguay who were in a very similar situation, that was part of the thing that drew us here. And so yeah, since we've been here, so like a day in the life, basically it's taken a lot of different courses, a lot of different things. At this point, about a year ago, we combined with another small church as well. We were a small church around 25, 30 people, and we're sharing a building with another church just so we didn't need to receive a bunch of donations. Like that's been one of the things that we're most proud of, is like we've given many times more than we've ever received from anybody, any of the people who are part of the church, which kind of has been something that separates us apart from there's lots of like these Brazilian prosperity religions where they say God's going to bless you if you give us money. And right. So we just wanted to like get as far away from that idea as possible. And so yeah, so basically we were sharing a building, and then that church for different reasons had to go a different direction. And so long story short, we combined with another small church. And so, yeah, so it's been awesome. I mean, there's three of us who are kind of helping. There's two specific pastors, and then I'm kind of like a missionary, pastor. And so yeah, it's just been a day in the life. Is just we meet with people, we do counseling, whether it's marital or just individual counseling, people who are in similar situations, kind of what I was describing. And then just preparing, like doing teaching, doing sermons, like all those kind of stuff. There's a little bit of everything, doing paperwork, like we kind of have to live in two different countries at the same time. We have people and stuff in the United States, and so we're keeping contact with them. And so there's a little bit of everything. And then just again, I'm a dad and a husband, and so we just had our fourth kid. Welcomed him a few months ago, and so just trying to give kids the time that they need, and
Sure.
recognizing that they're not in a normal situation. And so just little bit of everything.
Yeah. Well, Mazel
A
Tov
little
on
bit
the
of everything.
fourth. Um,
Thank you.
so how did you find Bitcoin, and how did Bitcoin find you
Yeah.
in this very exciting, dynamic experience you're
Yeah.
having?
Yeah. So I mean, it's so funny because I know, like, for most people, like, there's, first of all, there's like the missionary thing, and then there's like the missionary Bitcoiner, like, what in the
Mhm.
world? And so I think a lot of it, I first heard of Bitcoin in 2012, 2013. I walked into a broker, silver and gold broker dealer, just trying to like buy some silver coins, walked past the desk of this girl who had a Bitcoin sticker. And I just started talking to the guy who was running the place. And I was like, is this Bitcoin? Like, I've heard of that. And he's like, yeah, it's pretty crazy, you know? And he's like, I don't know if you'd be interested in that at this point, you know, just, it's so new. And so if I look at it back, I think Bitcoin is like $100, $200 or something. I'm like, oh my word, I wish I would have just bought some.
Mhm.
But and so that was kind of my first touch. And then most people, the first touch wasn't enough. And so it was around 2017 when the price started to spike that I kind of frantically trying to create an account on Coinbase, you know, with a VPN from Uruguay. And but yeah, it really wasn't that I didn't really kind of look into the why of Bitcoin and the thinking behind it until, you know, early 2019, when it started to kind of climb again. And so really there's several different factors that kind of really kind of affected me. One was just, I've always been just asking the question, why? Like, why does this look this way? Like, why do you believe what you believe? Why does this thing exist? How does it work? And so like, it was around that time where I started looking into, like, what is Bitcoin? Like, why does it exist? I had interactions with Austrian economics via, you know, Ron Paul primarily. And really just came to believe in that. And so then once I started looking at the philosophy behind Bitcoin, that was the thing. Like, that I was just like, man, I wish I'd found this before. I wish there had been the Breedlove, you know, or these other guys who are, you know, putting these ideas out there, the Pierre and Bitstein. Like, man, I wish I had found these guys earlier. And so that kind of started me down the path. And then also just seeing, like, as I'm reading and studying about it, and just seeing the effect that fiat money has had on different cultures, like, that was the second thing that just kind of put its hooks in me. Because, like I said, we have Venezuelan immigrants in our church who, you know, had to leave everything because their government has, you know, obliterated their currency by printing it. And then right across the river from us is Argentina, and their currencies failed 4 times due to similar things. And so just those two very you know, punctual things that are part of my day-to-day life. The Uruguayan peso, like, since we arrived 6 years ago, the peso has lost half its value, you know, it lost 100% of its value. It was, you know, 24 pesos to $1, you know, 6 years ago, and now it's about 43. So, I mean, just seeing, it's a day-to-day reality. I see these things working themselves out. And so the combination of those things working together, the philosophical and then just the practical day-to-day, I just was like, man, I have to do something about this, both for, you know, for our own self. Just, I was trying to find something to invest in, and I'm not a very, you know, smart, savvy investor. I just know that you're supposed to buy low and sell high. And when every other investing vehicle is literally at all-time highs, I probably shouldn't be buying those things. And so I guess there's the 3 of those things working themselves together are what kind of drew me to Bitcoin.
Sure. While we're at it with Venezuela, like, I'm curious, and again, I don't expect you to speak for all of Venezuela and everything that's happening, but just anecdotally, I'm more interested if you've heard anecdotes around people trying to get their wealth out of Venezuela, you know, whether just through the border, not so much because of not because of what happened with their money with inflation, but have you heard stories about, and not whether they used Bitcoin or not, but just what have you heard around people trying to?
Yeah, we have people from our church who, I mean, have crossed the border, you know, on foot illegally. Like, I mean, the border's shut down right now. And I mean, so you can kind of go through the woods at, you know, nearby these official checkpoints, and there's police there, and you have to bribe the police in order to, you know, let them, you know, let you out. And so we know people firsthand who've done that. I mean, it's crazy, honestly. Like, when you have women who are going by themselves, and I mean, just, you know, as a dad and as a husband and as somebody who knows these people, it's just, it just hurts you, and just, like, it weighs heavy on you to know that, like, you could have some guy who just doesn't care, and, you know, who just, you know, rapes, you know, one of these girls. Like, that could totally happen. So yeah, just to answer your question, we've totally heard of that. And yeah, it's happening.
Have you seen anything? I don't know if you have access to Venezuela or been there, but, like, have you seen, you know, or heard about empty shelves in supermarkets, or those kinds of things.
Yeah. We've talked to people. I just was talking to a guy, one of the guys in the church the other day. No, it wasn't a guy from the church. There's another friend of ours he's Venezuelan. He came here a few years before everything got really bad, and he was talking about how I was explaining to him about Bitcoin, just as a way, because he had to pay something like, I want to say 8 or 9% in order to send money back to Venezuela via a broker here, and so as we were talking, he's just saying, I asked him, when they go to the store, like, what's it like? And he said, he goes, everything's in dollars, like the prices are in dollars, but they can't put the dollar. It's just a number there, so it'll say like 3, 4, with no denominator, but like everybody knows, like, but they can't do it. They can't officially put dollars because that's illegal. And so it's just this whole disaster where everyone knows the game that's being played. They know the game that they have to play, but at the same time, they can't do it above ground because the government will make a stink. So.
Right. And you mentioned before, so in like around 2014 or so, you were looking for silver coins.
Yeah.
It was just as an inflation hedge. You were just scratching an itch, or
again, I'd heard Ron Paul, in 2010, I'm like, where were the Bitcoin ads? Like,
right.
Like, where were the people who could have helped me? But so 2010, I was just kind of, it's actually so funny. Like my economic, evolution, is very followed those kind of lines. So it was like, Ron Paul, Glenn Beck was like, more libertarian in those days. I was in college. I knew nothing about politics. I just studied the Bible and philosophy, and, knew some about politics, but hardly anything. And so that was kind of the route that I followed. And so, so you see gold advertisements, silver. And so I was convinced that, inflation was coming, and, was looking for those things as inflation hedges. So, yeah.
Now, I'm not going to make a direct comparison. I don't think Bitcoin is religion, but it can be religious, or, but I'm wondering, like, when you were learning about Christianity, or more so the second time, and then with Bitcoin, were there any kind of like parallels on that learning path?
Yeah. So, just the individual, the sense of responsibility, like the sense of like individual responsibility, just the fact that, people don't just, just like people are, the family is like the most basic unit of society, right? And so like you have to have, family has to have a wide berth in terms of what they can and can't do. That's the first unit of government is the family. And so libertarianism kind of, fit dovetail with that. A lot of libertarian principles of like, people have to be free, like people have to be free to make their own decisions. And so if families, parents can't make decisions for their children, really, they can't lead their families in the way that the scriptures expect parents to, kind of lead their families. So there's definitely a lot of overlap there. And so, I think the more that I study the scriptures, I just saw a lot of libertarian, principles. Like, just in the Old Testament, this is a longer rabbit trail that we won't go into, but just sometimes people think of like the Old Testament, and they think of like a theocracy. And so, but like one of the things that you see is like God warns the Israelites about the downside of having a king is that he's going to need to charge taxes. And so he's like, you're going to have to give like 10% of your money, like what you would otherwise just be able to keep and use, like you're going to have to do that. And so the more, it just was a crazy mind bender for me as I'm just seeing, just a 10% tax. God's presenting this as like this really thing that should motivate you not to want a king. And so, so just the more that I think for a lot of people, what they have is like, they have like this, it's like a surface level interaction with the scriptures. And it's just enough it's just weird enough and just like foreign enough. And then there's enough cultural Christianity, American Christianity, like there's enough of that where it just completely turns them off and they don't go deeper to kind of look at the scriptures themselves. And so really ironically, like the more that I kind of dove into the scriptures themselves, the more I was like, man, there's like these principles are everywhere. The idea that like even kings, like even the kings in the Old Testament, they couldn't just do whatever they wanted to. Like they were bound by the law. You have the story of one crazy story, the story of David or Daniel in the lion's den, where you have this king, Darius, who basically gets this his little henchmen get this law passed where, if you pray to anyone but him, then you have to be thrown into the lion's den. And so they catch Daniel praying, and they go to the king. They're like, "Look, king, like you passed this law, and he's doing this." And it doesn't say, Darius just said, "Well, forget it. We'll just change the law." It says, no, like the law was passed. The written law was a big deal, and so Daniel had to suffer the consequences. And so, like, I just look at that, and I mean, even in context where there's a king on the throne, the king couldn't just do whatever he wanted to. There were limits to the power of the king. And so when I step into the American context and I see governments that literally are acting like gods, where there's no limit to their power, literally, I mean, just Patriot Act, whatever you want to look at, the Federal Reserve, like they have unlimited ability to create money. Like those are the kind of things where I just, as a Christian, I look at that and I'm like, governments aren't gods. Like governments have to acknowledge their people. There's limits to their authority, and where governments fail to recognize the limits on their authority, like they fail to have authority. And so that's kind of my evolution in the more that I found as I'm looking at Bitcoin. I just realized, like, yeah, Bitcoin just is a check on, government, authority that they don't actually possess. So
is Bitcoin king, or is that a little maybe offensive to a Christian? And I asked that, I want to back it up a little bit. Like, I have a really hard time. Like, I think you do too. And like, like nobody should be king. Yeah. Right. Or have rules that are beyond what a king should have. Yeah. I kind of frame that up as like, I would never wear another man's name on my back of my shirt.
Sure.
But in some ways, and I listened to the conversation on Noted with I think most of you except for Breedlove and Derek. And there was this conversation about how it's kind of not debatable that Jesus existed. Yeah. And this was really interesting to me, that he's not, the way that it was framed up, and I don't know if it was you or maybe Lyle, I'm not sure, but it was framed up as Jesus is king based on the fact that we're still talking about him.
Yeah. So
that the calendar and the world revolves around him, which was a different angle or perspective to me than just pure maybe religion or scripture.
Sure. And so that was George who said those things. And so again, like what you see there is kind of, I mean, we have like a bunch of different backgrounds, like among the authors, themselves. And so again, like a lot of that, I mean, there's been a lot of different experiences like that we all bring to the table. And so, I mean, I'm not going to speak for George. Like George has had, certain experiences. And I think and I think he would be the first one to say, like, that shaped kind of how he sees things. And so I wouldn't necessarily like agree with like that being the only, that being.
I wasn't trying to say the only, but it was an interesting perspective.
Sure. Yep. I think what he said is true, I mean, yeah, like the fact that we're still talking about this guy who claimed to be God and claimed to rise from the dead. And I mean, just it's just, I mean, trying to make sense of that is crazy when they were this persecuted minority. I mean, there's a lot of things there that, I mean, really are, I mean, you have to really wrestle with that. I think that is really true.
There was a lot to unpack there. One of the things that, like Pierre even said, like, there's a lot of evidence that Jesus existed, that, he doesn't have a historical truth verification node, but, and I think it was Julia who was talking about there's more evidence and cross-reference and evidence from Jesus's enemies than maybe, I forget the other reference, Alexander the Great.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. And, so one of the other things I wanted to ask you about is, what do you make of, like what I'll call like the Immaculate Conception of Bitcoin?
Yes.
It's the first, but also, and then just tie in the disappearance of Satoshi, which is has some parallels to maybe Jesus of life, in some regards, coming and going.
Yeah, there's so many, like, honestly, Cedric, like there's so many things where I'm like, I honestly don't know what to make of this, because there's just so many things. Like I want to do like a blog post at some point where kind of I just lay out, like, I mean, I've said a few of them on Twitter. You've probably seen some of them. Like I've said, I just, I've shared some of them, but like there's a ton. I mean, like there's so many. So one of the things is, I mean, you talked about, it kind of comes out of nowhere. I mean, this immaculate, conception, this, creation out of nowhere, ex nihilo kind of, this guy just appears. I mean, Satoshi, I mean, this is again like joking, but you just look at it. I mean, he ministers for 3 years and then disappears. Jesus's ministry lasted 3 years. I mean, there's like all these like little weird coincidences. like he left it in the hand of like his disciples, like, there's like all these things that are just really interesting, that I'm not saying like this is,
Yeah.
God behind this, but like there's another one is, I mean, yeah, like you look at, so like when Moses Moses leading the people, the Israelites, like he led them to the edge of the promised land. But then Moses basically sins, and he basically, because he's a leader, he's held to higher standards, and basically God doesn't let him go into the promised land. He just gets to like look in. And so you look at Satoshi, like he comes up with this awesome invention. He brings, the world to the precipice, and then he doesn't actually get to go in, and enjoy it. And so that's another one. I mean, there's just a ton of them. Like
those are interesting.
Yeah, I have a bunch of them, but I just want to like write them all out. But I mean, I just look at it. Yeah, I mean, I one of the things is just like the finite nature of Bitcoin. Like that's just another thing where, there's only a certain amount of them. One of the principles, and we talk about this in the book, one of the principles that's just from the very beginning of the scripture is this idea of sowing and reaping. This idea of, you reap what you sow. Like there's correlation, like there's different, it's called different things. Like that's called karma, in some religions, but karma is more impersonal in the, monotheistic or in theistic religions. It's more, it's a personal force. Like there's, it's a personal, there's someone there who's bringing these, who's giving justice and whatever. And so I think like that's something with Bitcoin, especially when you compare it to a system where, I mean, the fiat system completely denies sowing and reaping, like debt is just money we owe ourselves. There's really no consequence. Like it's just such a farce. And so when you compare that with Bitcoin, like where Bitcoin basically says, yes, actions have consequences. There's, in order to get Bitcoin, you have to invest, you have to sow in order to reap Bitcoin. Like those kind of principles, as somebody who, subscribes to, Christianity and believes those things, I just see that that's a very important principle. And so, I mean, there's a lot of things, but that's one place. I mean, one of my favorite things, I don't think I've talked about this in any other place. One of the scriptures that comes up a lot with Christian Bitcoiners is the one where the Pharisees are trying to trip up Jesus, and they say, basically, should we pay taxes to Caesar, or not? It's basically trying to catch him, because if he says one thing, if he says, no, you don't have to pay taxes, well, they can go to the Romans and say, hey, this guy's, a tax rebel. He's trying to incite, tax rebellion, and then they can go kill him. The Romans will kill him. And if he says yes, well, then he's going to be unfavor, with the people. He's going to make them pay taxes. And so what Jesus says, he just completely plays them is, whose likeness is inscription is on this coin. And then he basically says, give to God, give to Caesar what's Caesar's, give to God what's God's. And contrary to, people say, like, Jesus is not advocating tax policy. Jesus is not saying like everyone needs to pay no matter what the tax is. Like that is not the point that Jesus is trying to make. Like what Jesus revealed is the Pharisees, they didn't care about money. They literally wanted to kill Jesus, like murder. They were willing to murder, if it meant, they were willing to say whatever and do whatever in order to get rid of Jesus. And so what Jesus wants to point out to them is like, so you're so focused and worried about like physical money, when he's like, you are God's money. Like you are made in God's image. You're God's money. And so like, I hadn't ever put that idea together. And so like, as I meditated on that, like I've got this article that I'm like 90% done with it. And I'm sure you, as a creative person, like you're like, I want it to be perfect and whatever. But so that I'm like talking about that idea that, I mean, like people are made in, like one of the ideas that the scriptures lay out is that people are made in God's image. And so like, what does that mean? And basically what it means is like, people are God's money. Like people are God's store of value. Like God, the most valuable, the scriptures present like God's character and who he is. Like God himself is like the most valuable thing in the universe. And so like, where does God store that value? He creates humans, and so as we look at like money, like Bitcoin is not God. Bitcoin is not king. Bitcoin, like money, is made to be a tool that's leveraged and used to be a blessing to people. It's designed to provide a fair and equitable, resource that facilitates trade between people, allows people to love their neighbor and give them fair value. And so, so many, I said this on another place somewhere, that basically, like when you look at most law systems, like why is theft wrong? Why is extortion wrong? Why are Ponzi schemes illegal? Like why are these things all illegal? It's because they all say that people are more important, or that money is more important than people. And so when the reason why Bitcoin, I see the value of it is because it's this thing that puts money back in this place where it's this tool to be used, and not this all-encompassing, we live to serve this thing. And so and this is just deflationary currencies in general, if your money is maintaining value, that means you're going to have to work less. You're going to have the ability. It's not going to, there's going to be people who just continue they want to accumulate more money. You can't do anything about that, but it allows people who want to have a more balanced life, who want to spend more time, serving their communities and their families. It's going to allow them to have that much more margin, and I see that as being, that's the way that God designs the world to work. Like when you plant a seed, the idea is that you plant a seed, you do the work up front, and then you reap a tree that produces fruit. And so you get your efforts are multiplied. And so I just see that as like, this is this principle that God has built into the world. And Bitcoin is one tool that, is more aligned with the reality that I see God creating into the world.
Is Bitcoin possibly a gift from God in the way that maybe gold was a gift from God and that fiat's not? Or is it kind of like, I've heard a rabbi once told me, if someone hits you, they might not have been right to hit you, but you might have needed to get hit for some other reason. Yeah. And the world is perfect. Try to get what the message is, even though you might have a disagreement with that individual and they shouldn't have hit you.
Sure.
So you could say everything is gift, everything's perfect, but is Bitcoin something like a gift from God, like gold would be considered? Sure. I'm not saying you consider gold to be a gift from God.
Yeah, no, I do think like the properties of gold made it again. So the scriptures lay out, Old Testament, New Testament lay out, or First Testament, Second Testament, like they lay out that, like Jesus says, if you want to sum up the entire scriptures, it's love God with all your heart, your soul, your mind, and your strength, and love your neighbor. And the second one that's on the same level, you can't do one without doing the other, is love your neighbor as yourself. And so, like, knowing that those are the laws, like those are the two priorities with which God created the world. Like what that means is those are the two things that God wants. And so, like when you see like out is laid out in the scriptures, both in the Old Testament and just you see God is constantly coming out and hammering those who institutionalize injustice and institutionalize and bring about the suffering of the poor and the widow, and the stranger. Like those are clearly antithetical to what it means, like to what God's will is for the world. And so, like I do think that like he's committed to his will being done. And so he's using events, he's using inventions, ideas that come out. He's always got kind of like a check on the evil that's going on in the world. It doesn't mean that the evil things won't happen, but there's not I do think like God is overseeing the events of the world. He's not going to let things get to like a certain point where the whole world just is destroyed. Like he's not allowing it. Like there's local or even, international atrocities that happen. And that like, those are like the problem of evil. Those are real things and real difficult things to wrestle with. But I do think God is over history, kind of making sure that it gets to this place that he wants it to get to. And so in that way, I do think that, like when you look at the suffering going on in the world as a result of fiat currencies and the unlimited power that it gives to governments, just the scale of suffering that's been able to happen, and just the destruction of families, by dividing families, kids spending all day away from their parents, and parents not being able to really, build into their children in the way that they have throughout human history. Like those things, I really think that, again, I think this is one of the reasons why Bitcoin exists, is God's just like, enough. God only allows evil to prosper for so long before he just says no. And I think it's a merciful thing. I think, and so, and that's I would say it's a gift. I would say it's a gift. I wouldn't say it's, in the same, it's not on the same level as, to me, like Jesus is obviously, because again, like Jesus, like when Jesus came, there's a whole bunch of people who like they rejected him because he wasn't the political and like economic immediate savior, that like, people who like the Jewish, people were expecting. And like his point in doing it wasn't saying what you're going through is great and easy. No, not at all. But what he's saying is like, his point is like, if I could deliver you from the physical, the physical suffering that you're going through, which had happened all throughout the Old Testament. He's like, I could deliver you from the physical difficulties that you're going through, but without really dealing with, the concept of sin, like this thing that the desire to live for oneself instead of God and one's community, like until that's dealt with, all these other things are just temporary, fixes. And so I see Bitcoin as being very helpful in like the day to day, but like it's not gonna change the fact there's gonna be people who love Bitcoin and love any kind of money more than they care about their needs of their communities.
Forgive me if I'm overstepping my skis here, but could Bitcoin or be considered prophecy? Form an extension of prophecy? Is it prophetic?
It's so crazy.
Does prophecy continue past Abraham and Moses and Jesus?
Yeah, it's honestly like, it's funny you say that, because I mean, like I've honestly, like I've talking, I think I sent this to Jimmy or Breedlove, who was just like, one of the ways that prophecy works is that like God reaches out to like either an individual or a small group of people and shows them like the future. And the reason why he does it is so that those people, when the difficulty comes, they'll know this is what God told us is going to happen. It's going to get hard. And so, but his purposes are going to be fulfilled in the end. And so one of the things I was literally just thinking like, man, the fact that we know like the release schedule of Bitcoin, like it allows you, again, not perfectly because no one knows the events of their life, but it allows you to plan, it allows you to make decisions, in a way that is more, it just allows you to plan further. It allows you to think into the future and kind of plan with those things in mind, which can be a dangerous thing, like, again, presuming that what's going to happen in the future. Like the scriptures are clear, like you shouldn't do that. And at the same time, you're also told not to be, you're told to be like the ant. The Proverbs say that we should be like ants, who are preparing for the future. And so I do think there's a sense in which, Bitcoin promotes low time preference thinking, which is, such a stark contrast with the modern, with like what fiat money does. And so I wouldn't say maybe it's not prophecy in the strict sense, but I do think it can serve a similar function to what prophecy, does.
Sure. I appreciate that. I want to turn to the book a bit. Before we do that, I want to set the table. And again, I love the book. I would have taken the book again as just really a Bitcoin book based in morality. I wouldn't have seen it as a religious book, but I recognize the title. I recognize the group that was brought together, and I've heard you guys speak on it a little bit. I was listening to Robert Breedlove and Jimmy Song on Stefan Livera, and they both had a very.
Can you hear me? Said
yeah, you just froze up for a second. Yeah, okay. So they both had a very different view on who the book was for, which is sort of natural and organic. They're both writing for a different audience, but they're still trying to write for the same audience at the same time. But I think Robert was thinking like, oh, maybe 20-year-old college junior who's in a fraternity will read this book and come to terms with Bitcoin maybe through the morality or Judeo-Christian lens. And Jimmy, I think, was more looking at maybe the soccer mom, and trying to get through to her. And what all that really said to me is, the book is just rooted in understanding money and how corrupt it's gotten, and trying to bring money back from a morality perspective. And rooted in Judeo-Christian narratives. And so I'd love to get into some of those narratives because they're just historical stories we've been telling ourselves for generations. But before that, just to set the table a little bit, I'd love to ask you, like, what is Christianity?
Yeah. So basically, again, and we mentioned this before we started. I think one of the misnomers is that, just one of the misnomers is basically, God from the beginning in the Old Testament, like his plan is that the whole world is filled with people. Like he creates humankind. They're supposed to, like carry out his will in the world. And so the idea of that was, I mean, it's kind of rooted in this. Basically, the idea is that when there's people, kings in the ancient world, what they would do is they would like put statues of themselves at like the far reaches, at like the borders of their territory. And so what basically that would do, this happened in like Egypt and stuff. And so you'd find like the statue of Pharaoh at the very, end of the Egyptian territory. And that would show you, when you saw that, you knew you were entering into the territory of, this leader. And so basically people were made in God's image. God had created the world. And so he wants people to fill the whole world, so that like the whole world basically points to who the creator is. It's basically, it's kind of a weird idea, but that's basically what God's, kind of trying to do. And so from the beginning, basically his plan gets kind of, temporarily frustrated. And so then basically humanity goes astray. And then basically God, again, in the Christian understanding of these things, basically God chooses this one family, and basically tells him right from the beginning, like, through you, Abraham, the world is screwed up. Like the world's messed up. And Abraham, I want to bless you. And he basically says, and through you, I'm going to bless the entire world. And so the idea is that God is going to bring back the world, and the world and people are going to carry out the God's initial plan. And that the way that's going to happen is God's going to choose a small segment, and he's going to like just reveal himself to them. And then those people someday are going to go out and they're going to tell the rest of the world of, what he's doing. And so that, Christianity basically sees, Jesus as this leader who's going to come, who's going to be the king to make everything right. The Jewish understanding of it is Mashiach, or the Messiah. So we see basically Jesus as this promised one who God promised in the beginning. And so he's come to basically invite the entire world to be part of God's family. And so, that's basically what it is to be a Christian. The term Christian was not chosen by like the followers of Jesus themselves. It was kind of like this derogatory thing, because like Christian just means little Christ. And so it's like, hey, look at those little Jesuses over there. Like they walk just like him. They do what he did. They're just the little Jesus people. And so it's ironic that, that's what we're known as. So basically when I think about like what it is to be a Christian, like it's being it's just being human. Like a Christian is just someone who is trying to imitate Jesus, who was the prototypical human, who in everything, like he laid down his life every day of his life to serve his neighbor, and surrendered every right that he had in order to carry out, his Father's will. And so when I think of a Christian, it's basically imitating Jesus. It's living your life as a servant of God and a servant of people. And so again, when I look at the world, I'm not here to make Jordan's name great. I'm not here to demand my rights. I'm here to, imitate Jesus by laying down my rights. And serving others, whether it's, the poor, whether it's, my family, whatever it is, I see myself as I'm put here to serve, and to imitate, Jesus, who did that as well.
Yeah, I have a couple more questions. Again, I just want to preface that, when I ask you a question about Christianity, my assumption here is that everyone knows that you're speaking for yourself and not, every single sect, and it's not definitive. And
it's
same
impossible
for myself.
to do.
Yeah,
it's impossible
but
to do that.
I'm trying to, table set here a bit, because I want to explore, the morality of money and the redemption of money. Yeah. So, and I want to kind of grasp, and ground what the viewpoint was coming into the book. So another thing I want to ask you about Christianity is, what is sort of like the view on the individual versus the collective?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's one of the really difficult things. I mean, most cultures tend to, go to extremes. And so like you'll have, typically, historically, like Eastern cultures they're much more collective. The family is everything. The extended family is everything. And you see a lot of that in Latin America, some different parts of Latin America. Whereas the West is more individualist. Like they put a lot more, give a lot more importance to the individual. And what I see in the scriptures is like both of those things are true. And it's difficult to like have those things, be in tension with each other. And so, I mean, you have you have individuals are important. You have, I mean, like Jesus tells the story of the shepherd who leaves the 99 to go save the one, and like, I mean, you're like, man, that seems like, I don't know if I would do that. It doesn't seem like a very good economic decision. You're putting the 99 at risk to get the one. And so, but in the West, we understand that more. We're more open to that. Well, of course. It's amazing. Like when you see, like in the, during war conflicts, you'll have one guy down behind enemy lines, and they'll send out, they'll risk the lives of 12 guys to go save this one. And so it's amazing how you see that this underlying belief just work itself out. Whereas, I'm trying to think of an example. I'll say, like, one of the things, like, you have, I've heard, like, interviews with people who've talked with people in the Islamic faith. And so in the Islamic faith, like the collective, like the family, and how one, basically it's an honor culture. And so, like, if you bring shame upon your family, they're justified in killing you, and again, like for in the West, you're like, what in the world? But in that, like, their view of what it is to be human, like, is the family is much more a part of that. And that's true in some extent, but like that gives explanatory power to some of these things, the worldviews that seem so different. It's because we have different understandings of what it is to be human. And so with Christianity, there is a lot of that intention. And it just throughout history, you see different, it works itself out in different ways. Right. But so again, I think those two things are intention, and but they're both very important. They're both important on in the Christian faith.
Yeah. And how did the book come together?
Yeah, that's the thing. Again, I feel like I was like kind of the last one to join the book, group. They'd been, Jimmy and what's his name? Jimmy and George had met at a conference and realized that they're both Christians. And they just said, hey, like, let's just start, studying some scriptures together. And so they just started reading different scriptures. And then, over time, they just invited different people in, Julia, Turiansky, and, Lyle, and they just basically started, adding them one at a time. And then they started, after reading the different scriptures, and doing like Bible studies, they basically started reading The Ethics of Money Production by Guido Holzman. And then we read Honest Money by Gary North. And so it was at the tail end of the Guido Holzman book, The Ethics of Money Production, that I got introduced to them, and they invited me to come, start reading it with them. And so I finished that book and then read Honest Money. And then once we had some really good discussions over the course of about 8 weeks. And so once we finished those books, I was just thinking, we were in the middle of the pandemic, and I was thinking, well, that was cool. Again, I didn't know anybody, and just some kind of a nobody in the Bitcoin world, and so just had got to meet some of these people, and I was like, okay, well, that was crazy. But and then a week or two later, I think George reached out to me and said, hey, we want to write our own book based on just kind of touching on a lot of these moral themes of money and just introducing the Bitcoin element. And so they're like, if you want to, you're more than welcome to. And so I ended up just deciding to do it. And so we just started, and it took about 6 months, all things told, meeting about once or twice a week. And it just was a really cool experience. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah. How do you think it enhanced your own learning and understanding of Bitcoin and money?
Yeah. I've said this before. You've heard, the idea of like, don't meet your heroes. Mm-hmm. And so I just think like meeting, people who, I knew Robert and Jimmy as, personalities within the Bitcoin, but to talk with them and meet them on a more personal level was just so neat. And I just gained a ton more respect for them. And then obviously getting to meet these other people who we aren't as well known on the popular level, but just like all these people. Lyle and Lyle's mind is incredible. Every tweet he puts out, I'm like, this is such value. Like, this is free. Like, he's out there. Julia's been in this for a super long time. She's like lots of awesome insights. Like George, all these guys. Derek as well. He's got a whole different context from the real estate world. So I just think, I got opened up to a whole different world than I knew existed, through talking with them, and just really, really grew to appreciate them. So
Yeah. I want to ask you about one of the parables in the book.
Sure. Yep.
For where your treasure is, there your heart will
Yep.
also be. Matthew chapter 6,
Yep.
verse 21. What does that
Yep.
verse mean to you?
Sure. Yeah. So basically, you don't have to read it, but like the right before that, he basically says, you can only serve, like you can't serve two masters. So basically, and again, this is part of this ill-fated article I'm trying to work on, is basically like the scriptures lay out this idea that no matter what kind of political system you live under, like your heart and your mind is a monarchy. Like there's one thing that will help order and subjugate the rest of your life. And so there's like one, so whether it's either God, like in this context, he lays out, it's either God or money. And there's one thing that's going to have your heart's allegiance, that you're going to seek above all things. And whatever that thing is that's in number, in space one, the first thing is going to order, it's going to drive how much time you spend. It's going to drive, what you do and why you do it, and what you use. You're going to use everything else, in two through whatever those spaces. You're going to use those things in service of whatever lives in that first space. And so to me, like I read that, and it's a sobering thing to realize, okay, something has this position of this primary position in my life, and knowing that I'm going to use everything else that I have, my resources, whatever other resources I have, that's happening. So I look at it like, okay, which thing that God says this thing should be number one, and the question that I have to consider is that thing actually a number one, or do I need to knock that thing out? What do I need to do in order to get, put myself in a position where I can have things in their right priority, place. And that's a challenging thing. Like, honestly, like I've gotten to a place where, over the last, year and a half, like I was spending more time on Bitcoin than I needed to. It was getting to a place where, I was spending more time, and I was spending a lot of time with that, and not as much time, like on other things that I needed to be, like, my family and, my wife, my kids, like it's just so easy to pick up the cell phone and, and to be on Twitter and just, to be learning and then with this, this newfound, like my tiny amount of fame, like it's just so easy for that to be like this dopamine hit, like, wow, there's these people out there who are benefiting from these thoughts that I'm having, these work that I'm doing. I think that's another thing, like just constantly trying to weigh these things. Like, do I have these things in where I say that I believe that they should be, those kind of things. That was kind of how I see it.
That really struck a chord. When I read the verse, which I read just directly from the book, and just what I quoted, I saw it more as about skin in the game, and about if your money is in a good, fair thing, you're going to have a good, fair outlook. But what you just said struck a chord, because while I had skin in the game, I was putting all my mind share there.
Yeah.
And I think it was a good place to put my mind share versus maybe fiat, but maybe it took away from my family. Yeah. As many other things might. So I think that was really interesting.
And to that point, just, like what you're saying, like one of the, I'm reading this book, and it's like a marriage book. And basically one of the things that he talks about that for me was just really convicting was, I've been sitting here and like thinking about, about like investment, like money as an investment and Bitcoin as an investment. And like what this book talked about is like your marriage is an investment. It's like, you need to think about like the time and resources that you're investing in your, your marriage or your kids. Like those are investments that you're gonna reap, or harvest from those things in the future. Are your kids going to want to spend time with you? Like, is your wife going to be there? Like those kind of things. And like, people go through horrible things. So like, I'm not trying to, but like, just taking that idea seriously of like your money is one investment and you should take that seriously, but like you have all these other things that have been given to you that you're investing as well. And so just trying to, make sure you're balanced in how you look at those things.
Yeah. The next one, I think you guys related to central banks, but again, I'll ask your opinion on what does it mean? Because obviously there's more to these things than I'm grasping at first cuff. So do not store up for yourself treasures on earth where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal. Matthew chapter 6, verse 19.
Yeah. Yeah. And so like without, I mean, definitely like you see the danger of like why does money exist? And like if money is this place where you're like, I have to sacrifice everything in order to accumulate money. Like I'm willing to say, like in that time, like accumulating like gold and stuff was like, it's not, it was even more hard. I mean, this is like what happens in deflationary currencies. It's really, I mean, it's hard to accumulate wealth. It's a lot more difficult. And so if you're able to accumulate wealth, I mean, you're going to, in a lot of cases, like you're having to resort to a lot of like not good things in order to do it. You're going to have to, I mean, you're having to resort to people. I mean, there's a lot of times like there's slavery involved, like there's lots of kind of things. And so for me, like, again, just even if that's not going on, if your primary thing driving you is I have to accumulate wealth, I have to find security in wealth, I have to find I want to find my identity in being the rich guy, and you're sacrificing the people and all these other things that are in your life. If you're sacrificing all those things in order to get, wealth, like you're not being a human. Like you're living in service of something that isn't going to bring you the freedom that, you're thinking it's going to, seek out. And so again, I think that's a danger with Bitcoin as well. I think it is. I think for especially people who are in it, who have gotten into Bitcoin earlier, I think like the way that I think about it, just I see the Venezuelans, I see the Venezuelans who are just having their purchasing power stolen away. And so I think about it on that level. And I think it's important for me. It's important for, I mean, all of us as Bitcoiners to keep our eye on the big goals here, which is for benefiting our neighbors and for benefiting people and not just making it rain and getting rich. Like there's the scriptures talk about there being, I mean, I was just reading the other day, one of the people who served the early church, I can't remember her name, it's in the beginning of Romans. Basically, she was this wealthier woman, and she was like a patron of the Apostle Paul's ministry. Like she was this lady who, for whatever reason, if she inherited it or she had this really good business, she was a wealthier lady. And because of that, she was able to serve the needs, the physical needs of the church. And so again, I think it goes down to this principle of having things and using things rather than things having you. I think that's the thrust of, you just need to be careful and recognize the danger that's there when money's involved.
Yeah.
So.
I thought this one was going to be rhetorical, but as I'm reading it, I remembered that it's scratching an itch. So can a throne of destruction be allied with you, one which devises mischief by decree? Psalm 94. Verse 20. And I'm wondering, if you could relate this to maybe America today. Yeah.
I just think, like, I mean, like one of the things the scriptures talk about is like, to whom much is given, much is required, and so like just the humility required. I mean, just that idea, like everything that you have is a gift, and again, like and like your life is a gift. And obviously, again, the first thing that leaps to mind, again, because just working with people on a daily basis is like, well, then you have people who hate their lives, who go through tremendous suffering. And so again, like you don't want to minimize that at all. But just like so many of the things that we have, like the most important things we didn't choose. Like I didn't choose to be born. I didn't choose when to be born. I didn't choose my parents. I didn't choose to have a working body. Like all these things that we have, like I didn't choose them. And so like if to apply it to America, like America has had this exorbitant privilege of having, the stronger currency. And what did they do with that privilege that they had? They literally abused it by messing with the money multiplier and by, stealing effectively from the rest of the world. They abused their right. That they
are we all complicit as Americans, even if we're Bitcoiners?
Yes. And so I say yes, on some level. I do not think, I do not believe that we will all bear the same weight of guilt. Because again, like you have like Jesus talked about, like to one who, woe to the one who causes one of these little ones to stumble. And so basically it'd be better for that one to have a millstone tied around his neck and thrown into the sea. And so I do think, like, I mean, again, assuming that the events of, or most of the events of the Creature of Jekyll Island are true, and this small group of bankers and politicians, were behind, a lot of that, like they will bear, like they will stand before God and will bear a much higher responsibility than the average person who doesn't understand these things. And
let me ask you a question about that.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. Let's take someone like Bernie Madoff.
Sure. Yeah.
But let's not get into Bernie.
Yep.
But let's say, someone does a crime, and maybe there were people behind Bernie. I'm not getting to Bernie, but someone commits a crime and they gain a lot of wealth.
Yep.
And let's say through that wealth, they can send their children to the best educational institutions.
Yep.
And provide their children with the best networks and opportunities.
Yep.
And so maybe the father commits the sin, and maybe the sons and daughters benefit from the sin. But are we suggesting that it will catch up to even the second and third generation? Or is it possible that the father commits the sin and the kids go scot-free and they get to benefit from, even if, they take the money away from the father at the end of the day, the children still have the job that they wouldn't have had, the education they wouldn't have had, the network, the support, etc.
Yeah. And I think, and I do think that's true. I mean, I think like, I can't, this is horrible, but I can't remember the verse. Like someplace it's like later on in the Old Testament, like, because again, like in the beginning, like God does hold the sins of the fathers against the children, basically to the second and third generation. Like he talks about that. And so, but then there comes a point, and I don't remember, bad missionary, like where it comes to a point where he basically says, I'm no longer going to do that. And so like, I look at it like, so again, so God himself is not like holding this specific over the father, like the sins of the fathers over the children, but just the practical consequences.
Yeah.
So like with Madoff, just use him as an example. So like his one of his sons commits suicide. Right. And so
the other dies of cancer.
Exactly.
And on.
Yeah. So like, I mean, so again, at the very least, again, I'm not willing to, like, that's God, I'm not willing to go there.
Right.
We don't know. But like they bore the shame, of the father, of the thing that they did. And so I think that's real.
Right.
So, yeah.
Okay. In terms of when you hear the word money, and I ask this from, not just an individual trying to bear the brunt of the world and figure things out, but and not just as maybe a family member who has friends and family come to them, but as a church pastor, and maybe money comes up. So when you hear the word money, what comes to mind, and how does it make you feel, and why?
Yeah, I mean, I think I think of, well, the first thing that comes to mind is probably just a tool. Like it's this tool that can bring, it can bring really a lot of good if it's used well, and it can also bring a lot of pain. I mean, we talk about this in the book, but just like, I mean, marriages destroyed, like families split apart. I mean, just through whether it's having a lot of money or not having enough money. Like one of the, I can't remember whose podcast, I think it was, I was on Paul talking to Paul Miller about this. And one of the things that it's in one of the Proverbs, or one of the Psalms or Proverbs, he basically says, give me two things before I die. Don't withhold them from me. Give me neither poverty nor riches, like lest I have poverty and I steal and basically give you a bad name, or if I have too much and I deny that I need you. And so I think that, I mean, both, what you see there is both having and not having lots of money is a recipe for temptation, a recipe for heartache. And so I think, it's a tool that the thing where it's a tool, and it's not everything. It's not the end all be all. It's a good tool, but it's not the reason to be alive. It's not the reason to despair. Like and for those of us who have more money, like we have a responsibility to look for opportunities to serve others who are in a place where they don't have those kind of things.
Right.
So I would say probably a tool is the thing that comes to mind.
Yeah, and I think to kind of cap that off and really just even talk about maybe inflation, but one of the parables, bread gained by deceit is sweet to a man, but afterwards his mouth will be full of gravel. That's the one that made me think of Madoff. Turning to more like, counterfeiting is illegal. It's always been illegal. We we live in this world where the government gets to counterfeit legally. But now there are repercussions to that. So, another parable here from Genesis, chapter 47, verse 15. When the money was all spent in the land of Egypt and in the land of Canaan, all the Egyptians come to Joseph and said, "Give us food, for why should we die in your presence?" And this, I'll kick it off a bit. Like,
Sure, yeah,
it really rings to, the winter is coming.
yeah,
And now we're in this situation. And this story, if I remember it correctly, I mean, Joseph was sold into slavery by his brothers.
Yep.
And then works his, way up to Vizier. And he actually provides great abundance for Egypt through his wisdom.
Yep.
And now there's this situation where, the Pharaoh fucks it all up.
Yep.
And they come to Joseph. It's kind of like, Yellen and Powell fuck everything up, and you come to Breedlove for the answers.
Yes.
So what do you make of this parable?
Yeah, well, and again, I'll shout out, give credit where it's due, and the rest of the authors would say the same thing. So Gary North, in his book Honest Money, like talks about this passage, goes really in depth on it, and basically, so you have this situation where, again, like God gives, again, you can definitely tie Bitcoin, you can tie there's parallels there. So like God basically gives prophecy, like gives a dream to Joseph, where he basically shows Joseph, this is what's going to happen. And like, you guys better get ready, start storing up food right now and get ready for this. The bottom's going to fall out of this thing. And so, he does that. And so then he's put in a place, he's put in a place where he's able to, benefit not just Egypt, but also, the rest of the surrounding, countries and stuff. And so, I do see parallels there between, just the current situation in Bitcoin and just the whole world is in this bad situation where, fiat money is literally going to zero, and, it's going to be a bad thing. It's going to be, people are going to be hurting. And, right at this time, we have this thing that, has the potential to just, rescue, the bond market and, all these things that are otherwise going to just cause, so much pain worldwide. I do think there are similarities there. And again, Bitcoin being personified, as a type of Joseph, I do see the similarities there. That'll preach said. So, I do think like there's comparisons to be made.
Yeah. Before we turn to the church, which you guys get into in the back end of the book,
Yep.
Another thing you guys wrote about was once community assets are captured, unfathomable abuses of power will occur. Taxing the rich is like a slave shaking down a slave.
Yeah.
Can you maybe expand on that a little bit? Because I think that we're in this anxious time.
Yeah.
Where the haves and the have-nots, and maybe the have-nots are going at each other a little bit.
Yeah. I think, like, again, one of the things, the principles that people talk about is like with Bitcoin and just with anything. One of the things that Jesus says, you're supposed to love your enemies. And again, like what form that takes, again, you have to talk about that. But like, you love your enemies. And so one of the things that Pierre Rochard talks about is like, Bitcoin is for your enemies.
Right.
Bitcoin's for enemies. And so one of the things that, like, I just think like one of the reasons why we should want Bitcoin to have a bigger place of prominence is for the sake of our enemies. Like these politicians are just so, it's a miserable existence. Like they are so detached from the real life and what it really is supposed to be a human. Like these people know, like it's just power drunk, money hungry, this whole thing, it's just miserable existence. And so again, obviously I know they're loving it in some sense, but like, this is not how God designed people to live, where you're benefiting at the expense of all these other people. And so like, I think that because, fiat money just allows this, it's designed to be this money transfer from, just the middle class and poor people to the rich. And that again, like you look at these families, like look at, somebody like, somebody who's just been in the news in the last few months is like Paris Hilton, right? She's like so rich. She's got so much money. She's got so much fame. And like, what happens with this girl? I mean, she goes through like super just a bad thing. I mean, just abused by people, just all kinds of stuff. I mean, all these celebrities, they're presented to us like, man, this is what we should want to be. We should want to have all this fame, all this money. And yet, like, you see these people left, right, and center, again, just suffering, from like whether it's drug abuse or just loneliness or all these things. Like, we were not made to be made much of by people. Like, this is not a comfortable, this is not what we were designed to be. And so fiat money enables people to get to these unparalleled levels of wealth that just,
that's interesting,
result in not good things. So
that's really interesting. I go off a little bit on what Dave Chappelle says about celebrity, where the people that become celebrities are generally, you would think, are the most strong-willed, strong-minded, smartest, charismatic, these things. And then when they have these massive breakdowns or, kind of catastrophic experiences, you wonder, like, what externalities broke them. Because his hypothesis is that they're not easily breaking people or brokeable people, whatever the verb is there. But that something external happened to them, that you should not expect celebrities to be broken this easily like porcelain. And what that brings me to, I want to say, falls under like, it came up in the conversation on notice. So love thy neighbor. And what does that really mean? And I'm going to, interject with Leviticus chapter 19, verse 36, under what you guys call it's just business. Okay. So, you shall have just balances, just weights, a just ephah, and just him. I am the Lord your God who brought you out from the land of Egypt. So, like, what is this? It's just business, and how has that affected us?
Yeah. So basically, just the idea of like it's just business is this thing where it's just, it's not personal. Like, I'm using you. I'm like, I mean, Wall Street, like what happened with, it's one of I love the movie, is The Big Short. Yeah, like I just love that movie. Like I said, I mean, you see that, it's not personal, we're just trying to make money. Like, we're just trying to do this. And so it's just this idea that you separate money from, caring about people. Like, it's that your intentions are all that ultimately matters. And these guys didn't have bad intentions. They're just trying to get money. And so, I mean, again, your intentions matter a lot. Jesus makes that clear that, that's at the end of the day, if you do all the right things, but don't have the right motives, like, it doesn't, in God's eyes, like, it doesn't serve for anything. But it's more than it's more than the intentions, And so just the fact that, this current system, I mean, it knowingly creates zero-sum game, zero-sum games all over the place, where, it's altcoins, like these altcoins, one person's going to win and one person's going to lose, and fiat money, the rich will get richer, the hard assets will, go to them, land, all these things, they'll be able to accumulate them, and, the everyday people will just get poorer and poorer and poorer. And that's just what's going to happen in the majority of the places. And so, and again, it's just business. We want to just like rid ourselves, the people who are in those positions, they don't want to carry that weight, but the reality is you bear responsibility, like that's the real consequences, again, that's what, that's the reaping of this, the seeds that that have been sown. And so, again, do I think that these, central bankers, with the creature of drug, do I think that they ever could have imagined like the suffering that? Well, no, I don't think that. I think they're, again, like the scriptures, like the idea of like sin, of like not loving your neighbor, not loving God, doing things, motivated by, love of self at the expense of, God and other people, like those things. It's short-sighted. You don't want to think about the consequences. You just like, I know that I want this thing that's right in front of me. And so, like, that's just what's happened. That's what's happened. Fiat promotes and just, propagates that line of thinking. And Bitcoin, by contrast, promotes more longer time preference thinking. Like, it's one of the coolest things to me is, I was not expecting this at all, was just like, you see Bitcoiners who like want to have kids and are like in a culture where the birth rate is plummeting. Like, Bitcoiners seems like disproportionately like they want to have kids, they enjoy kids, and again, like there's a bunch of other things, but just are thinking like, I want to leave an inheritance, not just monetary. Like, I want to leave want to invest in the future of my country, or the world, my family. I want to think 100 years into the future, even if I'm not going to be here. And I think like that's like societies have to. I mean, like societies historically, people, most cultures began with religious beliefs. They have some sort of things. There's some God who is there at the end of the day, who I'm going to have to give an account to. And so like, it makes you think, it makes you prepare for that day. I want to prepare. I'm a steward of things. I'm going to have to give an account for the way I live my life. And so that thought, again, that can be abused to be, used to manipulate people. But even in the best case, like people, it's causing, hey, there's a day coming in the future, and I want to prepare for it. I want to invest my life and the things that I have toward that goal. And I think Bitcoin really does help, towards kind of restoring that more healthy line of thinking.
Yeah. Yeah. It was awesome. Another thing I want to delve into is, how bad money or fiat corrupts the church. I want to zoom out maybe more to the institutional versus the individual. And I want to, touch that, you said some very notable things at the top of the show where you try to spend less than you raised, give back more than you take, and these kinds of things. It was really interesting. Jimmy Song, again, I think it was on Stefan Lavera, talked about how, that, the opportunity for the money printer go burr and for the church to take out loans can kind of get the church a little ahead of itself. And now they got to manage the loan and the mortgage more than the congregation. And then you get all kind of externalities. I saw this a lot with temples where I grew up, where, a lot of older congregants are leaving the state, and the newer congregants aren't becoming congregants. They have Yom Kippur break fast at a Chinese restaurant, or whatever it is, instead of going to the temple. Yet the temple, the church has to service that mortgage. And then they have to turn to things like more like country club economics, like musicals and golf outings and fundraisers. So, how do you think, fiat has affected the broader institution of church? And how does that compare and contrast to, how you're trying to be a church pastor, and maybe as a Bitcoiner?
Sure. I do think, it is like one of the things that, throughout like the Old Testament scriptures that you see is just like, you see God, he comes down, he basically says, there's lots of times where he says, basically, Israel, like you're acting just like the nations that are around you. Like you guys want to just imitate them. You guys it's kind of like what I did again when I was in like middle and high school. It was like, I just wanted to be one of everybody. I just wanted to be normal. I want to have the things that my friends have. I want to be like them. And so, that's just always it's not fun to be. There's a lot of times where it's hard to be like the one who has higher standards, And so the natural, so there's that's just, normal societal pressures. And then I think, and so there's still like, there's responsibility there. And at the same time, so part of it is the responsibility falls on them. The other part is when you have institutionalized, sanctified, iniquity, like you have, like fiat money is this thing where it was made by a small group of people at the top, and then everyone else is made to bear the consequences. Like, just over time, the consequences get more and more dire. And so, it's again, no one forces churches and synagogues to take out these, to go into debt, to take out these expensive mortgages. Nobody, so like that responsibility falls on them. And so like, you do have examples of that. I remember I attended a church in Tampa that was this big church that took out, raised a whole bunch of money. They raised a big chunk of it, and then just bought this humongous building complex and everything. And since then, this church has gone through all kinds of different things because of the pressure that they felt in order to try to pay the cost for this building. And so the cool thing is, for every church like that, maybe not for every, maybe there's probably one of what I'm about to describe for every 10 of those. We have like our home church that again was this small church plant where we, in the town where we lived in Florida. They basically, they're in a different situation where they have just decided we're not going into debt. And so, they have, for 10 years that this church has existed, they have, rented buildings and, been able to set aside, money to be able to try to, eventually, buy a building. And so again, so this is, I just love it because I mean, these people, again, these are some of the people who I just respect the most from, you know, as a Christian. I mean, I just look at their lives and I see these people are walking what they say they believe. And so again, and just seeing in a very holistic way, you know, these people were thinking long time preference. You know, they didn't want to just do what was normal and what was easy. But again, so that just doesn't happen a lot. And so I think that, you know, what's happening as a consequence is you're getting to a point like this, you have COVID hit, and all of a sudden half your congregation loses their jobs, and all of a sudden you're in a lurch, you know, and you see the importance, you see the goodness of these things that God says, you know, where he talks about danger all throughout the Bible, about danger, about debt being a dangerous thing. And one of the things you see is like, this is why, you know, like sometimes it takes hardship for us to see the why of why, you know, God or whatever, you know, if it's your parents or whatever, you have to go through the hard things in order to see the reasons behind these things.
Yeah. Another question you guys asked in the book that really struck a chord was how much human life has been wasted by bureaucracy created from fiat money.
Yeah.
And the related proverb here is, it's Proverbs chapter 13:23. The fallow ground of the poor would yield much food, but it is swept away through injustice.
Yep.
And what do you, how do you relate to that in Bitcoin?
Yeah. I mean, again, just like one of the things I love, the images I love is, again, what is a government supposed to do? And I just think like the government at this point has gotten so far beyond like what like governments are supposed to do. I mean, just the basic thing of government is to provide a just atmosphere, you know. And like one of the things that, again, you don't see this practice very much in a lot of churches is, you know, the idea is like the idea that most people have of churches is that they operate like this: the pastors do everything, like they do the ministering, or the priest, whoever it is, like the rabbi, they do everything. And yet, like one of the things you see Paul talking about in the New Testament is he basically says the job of pastors is to equip the people to do the work of the ministry. And so the idea is that like the people, they come and are trained. They're trained to take the message to their specific context, and they're the ones actually, making disciples, whatever it is, like, taking the message to those places. Because there's way more of them than there are the pastors themselves. And so I think I see a similar correlation between how government is supposed to work. The government is supposed to provide the parameters, whether it's the doctrine, or whatever. Like these are the practices. This is the space that we're going to live and work in. But then have at it, like just go. And there's supposed to be a lot more freedom. And so I just think like the way when you look at, you look at how, the government puts their hands in everything. Like there's taxes for everything. Like they just put their hands in every part of people's life. And what is the fruit of it? It bears injustice. Like it's injustice from the standpoint of like people, just the rich. Like the rich are taxed at rates that are super high. Just so there's that. I don't think that's, they've again, it's so hard to even talk about these things because of how much is tied up with the fiat side of things. But just in general, like there's nothing wrong with, with being rich. And so if you're just constantly reaching into somebody's pocket, like that's not good. At the same time, the poor are having their buying power, stolen, right. Just in increasing degree. And so like that's horrible as well. And so, just where the rich knowingly use their power, not to serve others, but to abuse others, it's horrible. It's a horrible situation. And Bitcoin basically, restores everyone to one economic standard where everyone has to play by the same rules. I love the image. This was where I started. Like, I love this image of this. There can be a guy in the Philippines on an island, some small little town in the Philippines who has internet, who can buy Bitcoin. Like, it's just incredible to me. You can buy like the hardest asset, hardest monetary asset that's ever existed. He can sit there and he has the same opportunity as Goldman Sachs. Like it's just, just that idea is just, it's just such a cool idea. And such, it's a just system. There's only 21 million Bitcoin, but they're available to anyone who has internet. Again, that's not a perfect system. There's plenty of people who don't have internet, maybe who can't do that. But as far as like when you compare that with the system that exists, it's a way more just system.
Right. My final question, and I reserve to ask it in 27 parts and infinite follow-ups. So just around family, we talked a little bit about government and sort of the implications there. But we think we touched a little bit earlier, but birth rates are going down in every first world nation, and one of the biggest reasons is because children are seen as a bad trade-off. And I'm going to follow this up with a little bit of like, not only I think are children seen as a bad trade-off in today's times, but I also think that humanity is almost renouncing its dominion. And the parable I'll read is from Genesis chapter 128. God blessed them, and God said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth, and subdue it, and rule over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the sky, and over every living thing that moves on the earth."
I do think, I think that's part of it is, you have this on a lot of different, you have identity crises happening at like every level of society, right? You have, there's so much questions of identity, like there's like the identity politics, all those kind of things. And there's a lot of things. We're in this moment where we don't know who we are. We don't know what politics is. We don't know what, there's just so much upheaval that's going on. And authority, there's crises of authority, like every level of governance, there's scandal, all these things. And we're at this place where, it's a very hard thing. People really don't know who to trust. They don't know what's real. Like the whole fake news. Everybody's just trying to figure out what is real. What is, like, why am I here? There's these existential questions are being faced, and where historically you have, you go to your parents or you go to, religious authorities, like there's crises in those places as well. I think the family is just one symptom of that. People, like, things are getting more and more expensive, and so parents are having to work more and more, and the communities are weaker than they ever have been. Like in the past, maybe you'd have a community of people that are strong, to have similar, whether it's religious communities or other things. A lot of times their family would live nearby, and now just increasingly in the West, people live nowhere near their family. And so everything's made a whole lot harder. You have to pay for things that historically your family would do for you. Like your mom and dad could watch your kids, so you guys could go on a date, and that would give you a little bit more margin as a couple. And now parents, grandparents live far away, or there's just all kinds of things that are consequences of fiat money, and consequences of just these breakdowns in basic places of trust in society. And so I think, again, children are one evidence of that. And so what happens is you're going to have these cultures that are just ceasing to exist. Like if you don't value kids, eventually you will cease to exist. Like your people will cease to exist, and the people who do value them, they will be there. And so this is why you see, and again, this is not like a judgment, just it's natural. Like in Europe, you have Muslim communities that are growing because Muslims, like, they value children. And Jewish families like value children. Christians, like, they, more than other people, like, value children. And so those are still relatively stable, if not very healthy, birth populations. But like where you see, just statistically, where you see those commitments decreasing and playing a smaller role, you see birth rates falling. And so, like, again, I think that it's sad, it's interesting. I don't know how it's all going to work out, but I do think it's forcing us to come to grips with these basic foundational questions. Who are we? Why are we here? I think that's just a real thing that's going on right now that we're kind of living out and living in the midst of.
Right. So. Yeah, not unusual for my show. We didn't go hard on Bitcoin because I think a lot of the things that we covered really underpin, your views on Bitcoin and some of our views. And usually at this point, I usually ask people, like, what are their longer term outlooks? But I'm kind of curious to ask you what you think your shorter term outlook is for the greater world. Like, is it more tumultuous in 2021 than it's been? And and I'm saying, historically speaking, I know it feels tumultuous, but it's like fish in water. And how do you think maybe the next year or two is going to go?
Yeah, I think one of the things that is difficult is it's difficult again. One of the reasons why it's hard to kind of orient ourselves and figure out like what's real is because like with technology, everything is just immediately right in your face. Like there's things that happen on, on the other side of the world, and all of a sudden, like, I mean, like the again, no criticism, like the Black Lives Matter protests, like stuff happens to like a guy in the United States dies, and then literally around the world, there's people saying that guy's name 2 days later. I mean, it's just incredible, just the phenomenon. And so, but like one of the things is when you just realize, when you look at the statistics of things like violence, like they're actually all going down. Like I mean, murder rate is like down. It's like it's being statistically going down over the last 20 or 30 years. But our eyes and our experience are telling us something very different.
Right.
And so I think like that's part of, I mean, on a lot of levels, things are getting better. I mean, people are more aware of things. And at the same time, like the roots that are underlying a lot of these things are just disappearing. And so again, what happens, and again, just you go look at, I think a tree, Psalm 1 talks about, he says, like, blessed is the man who like walks not in the counsel of the wicked, and nor stands in the way of sin. Like basically compares people to trees. And he basically says, like, the man who doesn't walk in the counsel of the wicked, the man who is living to honor God and to take care of people, he's like a tree planted by streams of water. And so basically a tree planted by streams of water has this constant, has the constant nutrients. It's able to grow strong roots that go deep, that allow it to survive, storms or whatever, earthquake, whatever it comes. It's more likely to be able to do those things. And so on the surface, it looks like we're in a very good place, and in some ways we are. But the roots underneath those things, I think, are weaker. I think are very weak. And so, I mean, I just think politically there's so much dissension. There's a lack of trust, and yeah, I don't know. I honestly don't know. I could, again, sometimes I was just listening to another like pastor talking about these things. It was just like, a lot of times in the scriptures, when things look the darkest, like God, with the Israelites are getting ready to cross the Red Sea, and right as they get to the Red Sea, there's this Red Sea before them. What are we going to do? We turn around and we see the Egyptians coming at us. It's like, what in the world? We're dead. We're cooked. And then God, basically just waits until the last moment, and then delivers his people. So that's what I'm praying for. Like, would love to see happen. And at the same time, like sometimes, we go through hard things, and we have to go through hard things in order to realize, in order to basically come to convictions about those core beliefs, and see their importance. I think they've been taken for granted for a long time. And yeah, I don't know. I honestly don't know. I'm no prophet on these things, but
I hear you. I just wanted to get your sentiment. I get what you're saying. Sometimes it's darkest before the light.
Yep.
And you really don't know if it's going to get darker or brighter, if you're in that final darkness or not, but I've really appreciated this conversation. This was really deep and meaningful for me. I've enjoyed this immensely. I'm going to leave it to you for any parting words. I hope we covered a lot of ground that you were interested in. And if you have any parting words, and definitely let people know where they could find you.
Sure. Yeah. So you can, just basically the first thing I want to say is just, again, try to say this and every time, it's like, thank you to Jimmy and Derek and Robert, and go find all these guys. Their names are, if you have the book, go buy the book. Like, thank God for Bitcoin. You got a copy right there. Yeah. So go get that. We've been having all kinds of trouble with it. Look at the notes, man. We've been like having all kinds of trouble getting the Audible version like up and running. They keep making it hard on us. So it should be up there any day now. But yeah, go get that. And then again, like I said, Jimmy and Robert and Derek and George and Gabe and Julia and Derek. I think that's everyone. Just super thankful to them. Go check them out on Twitter and find their stuff. They're putting out good content. Yeah, man, I'm just, again, super thankful for you. I've really appreciated following you on Twitter and, just seeing the stuff that you post and the people you give voices to. But again, I saw you've been posting several clips of that conversation you had with, Katie, the Russian, and Jimmy and
from Thanksgiving.
Pierre. Yeah. I just appreciate a lot of those guys. If you're interested, I think I can say this, that we're going to do beginning of April, we're going to do like a book release, book celebration party. And so we're going to do that in Austin. It's going to be Austin on the, let's see, what is it? The 7th, I think, is the night, the 7th of April. We're going to go to Fogo de Chao and they're in Austin. And they basically, I wasn't going to be able to come just because like, it's just hard and like flights are expensive. And so they are super generous as they decide to fly me up there. So I'm actually going to be there and get to meet all of them in person for the first time. And get to meet, so I'm looking forward to that, getting to meet Pierre. I really respect him, and so I'm looking forward to meeting him as well. So so if you guys are able to come, you guys live in Austin or nearby, you can come. That'd be cool to see you guys.
I'm not near there, but I might make it over there, so please include the details. I'm very interested in visiting Austin soon. I'm gonna front the book, Thank God for Bitcoin. I think it's fabulous. I don't see it, I just think it was an awesome book, kind of like Ethics of Money Production. It really it just goes over the history of money, what is money, and why it's important, and the morality behind it. It's rooted in Judeo-Christian values. And I just thought it was fantastic. Your co-authors, Robert Breedlove, Gabe Higgins, George McHale, Lyle Pratt, Jimmy Song, Julia Turanowski, and Derek Walchuk. I don't think I got Julia's last name right. But I did the best I could very quickly, but I think it's fantastic, and I've appreciated this so much. I'm going to have George on soon,
awesome.
in about a month, to talk about the book too as well, and his experiences, and I'm very excited for that, but I digress. Thank you, Jordan. This was so dope. I really appreciated this.
Man, I really appreciate it. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Jordan Bush on the creation, corruption, and redemption of money right here on the Bitcoin Matrix podcast. And thank you for listening. If you enjoy these conversations, please subscribe and give a 5-star review wherever you listen to your podcasts, and share with your friends and family. That's the best way to spread the word. The Bitcoin way. This is Cedric. Peace.